We are discussing now one of the very fundamental and very enjoyable topics in Hasidus, understanding the presence of Hashem in the world, comparing or not comparing it to understanding its similarities, differences between the soul inside of a body. Just like you have an neshama in a body, you have God's presence in the world. Some places we say, just like the soul fills the body, God fills the world. In some places we say it's not similar at all. So we're going to discuss that. And we'll discuss in general the idea of Hashem's presence within us as people, Hashem's presence within the Jew. So we're basing this all on a verse that says, Ashreinu matev chalkenu umanoim garelenu. This is taken from a letter that the Alter Rebbe wrote asking for tzedakah in Israel, asking for tzedakah the people out of Israel should give, even though it's difficult to support Israel, the Yidden in Eretz Israel. And the interesting thing is when the letter was put in here by his sons after his passing, they took out the beginning and end of the letter where it discusses the actual giving of tzedakah, but the content remains the same. I don't know if it's because they wanted to make it more applicable to every situation, but it's a very basic idea being addressed here in an unbelievable way, and some beautiful ideas that were surprising in how the Alter Rebbe presents it in a beautiful way. So we're in page Kuf Yud Aleph, which is the equivalent of page 221. And if we're looking inside here, I'm going to go back a couple lines because I want to get into the flow of what's being discussed here. One of the things we spoke of is the phenomenal concept that on one hand, Hashem's presence in the world is absolute. When we say absolute, meaning it's the highest level of godliness that's here and everywhere. At the same exact time, we say Hashem is disconnected from the world, which seems to be a very surprising concept. And this is all influenced, not influenced, but this is all seen in the name, reflected in the name Hakodesh Baruch Hu. That on one hand, Hashem is Hakodesh. He is above, he's separated, he's exalted in a disconnected way from the world, like separate, Kadesh. At the same time, we say Baruch Hu, he's drawn down into the world. So HaKadosh, Baruch Hu, seems to be two opposites, but the truth is that is the beauty, that is the novelty, that is the extraordinary true reality of Hashem's presence, that on one hand, Hashem is absolutely here, at the same time, he's absolutely not perceived, not seen. And the metaphor we gave last time was to talk about this was the idea of radio waves inside of a room. You can have radio waves fill up a city, fill up a neighborhood, fill up a room, and it could be filled with things being transmitted on those radio waves. You could have music, you could have conversations, you could have all sorts of things being transmitted, but it's absolutely disconnected from the people in the room. Why? Because if you don't have the right receiver to receive it, as much as it's present here, and 100% this room is packed with all sorts of waves and all sorts of truths, of conversations, of music, sound, and everything from radio waves and Wi-Fi and cellular and everything. At the same time, we don't see any of it. It's completely disconnected from us. That's a metaphor that we can use to understand this idea of Hashem is everywhere. At the same time, he's disconnected. So we're saying this way, Hashem is not at all like a soul inside of a body. In this way, why is it different? The soul that comes into the body is completely affected by the experience. Your mitzvah that you do, God forbid you're doing something wrong that you shouldn't do, the experiences, the soul is completely transformed, elevated, pained, excited, happy, thirsty for meaning and purpose inside the human body, inside the body of a Jew. Whereas God's presence in the world, this atmos, this essence of God, is completely unaffected and disconnected from everything in the world. So what did Hashem do? Hashem had to do something called from the level of Hashem's name, Ushmoy, Hashem's name. The name of Hashem is not God himself. It's something which is disconnected from God. Like we know the name is not the person. The name is something only someone else needs. If you're alone, you don't need a name. Someone else needs your name. At the same time, a name has a deep, profound connection to the person. We know if you change your name, it can give you added blessings. People who are not well have the name changed. People's name reflects and tells you a lot about the person. So the name is something on one hand is very disconnected. It's very not part of you. At the same time, it is strongly bound with the person. So Hashem's name, so to speak, represents a level of godliness that's not God himself, but God's extension, Hashmai. And then of that you have Hoidai, the ray of God's name, not the ray of God. The ray of God's name is what goes, because Niskav Shmei Levade, we say in the verse every time we take out the Torah. We say it also in the morning davening. Ki Niskav Shmei Levade, his name is separate, it's all above. So what comes down here? Even the level of name is nothing, only Haidai, Zivai, a ray, an extension of light from his name that comes out into the world. And even that, as we'll see in a moment, is degraded tremendously by Tzimtzumim, by Hishtalshlus, by Ilva Alul, and all different things that take the name of God, the light in God's name, and degrade it even more so it can be received and experienced in the world. That is what is compared to the soul and the body. That part of godliness, the extension of God's name, which is an extension of godliness, that level, the ray of God's name, is what comes into the world in a way that does get affected. And therefore, when we say that we're affecting God in the general conversation, we're talking about that level of godliness that comes into the world in a more revealed or vulnerable or relatable way, which is the extension, the ray of light that comes from God's name through the process of Tzimtzumim, etc. So let's see this. And this is all coming to explain, again, the Pasuk Ashreinu, Matefel Kenu, it's coming to explain what does it mean, this verse. So we're talking again about Eretz Yisrael, which is called a Geirel. We know land is given as a Geirel. We're talking about the Jewish person, which is the person that has a part of God, which is a Chelek Elikah. And these are the words we're going to address and explain to fully comprehend this idea of the relationship with Hashem and the world, Hashem and the Jewish person, etc. And it's a phenomenal, beautiful discussion.
Goral is also lottery.
Yeah. Girl means a lottery. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So we're going back a couple lines. But I'm going to go through it quickly. Kihine, it's the 6th or 7th line in the chapter of 7, and the last word on the line. So, again, I'm going to read the first 5, 6, 7 lines quickly because we did this last week. I just want to get back into the flow. Kihine, be'emes, in truth, Hakodesh, Baruch Hu, God, godless, God, Kishmoi Kain Hu. His name is best description of who he is. Like we said before, Hakodesh, he is separate. Baruch, he's drawn into the world. Even though God's essence, God's atzmos, not talking about the world of Mamali, we're talking about more something like Seviv or higher. Even though Hashem's presence fills the entire world, the higher worlds and the lower worlds, from the highest places, till down here in the physical earth of this coarse and corporal existence. Like it says, the word ani is like anochi, my essence. I fill the world. Halayas hashamayim, is it not the heavens and the earth that ani, I fill? Ani referring to the essence of God. Ani mamish. What does ani mean? The hainemu husei v'asmusi kavayachol. We're talking about God's essence fills the world. God's essence is here, atzmus itself. And we're going to learn about this coming up soon as Yud Shvat. We start learning about Basi Lagani, bringing down God's presence into the world, Iker Shina, to bring down the essence of God. This is the idea that God's actual presence, God's essence is found here in this world, not some extension, not some light, not just some sort of an extension or glory of God, but God himself. Afal Pikei, like the name reflects, the name indicates, HaKadosh, he's separate, even though Baruch Hu, even though he comes into the world. Afal Pikei, Kadosh, Umuvdo, Melyenim v'tachtonim. Nevertheless, even though Hashem comes into the world, he is separate completely, not just in the lower worlds, even from the higher worlds, he's completely separate. And God is not affected or claimed or held onto or grasped by the world, like we do say about a soul. Like we say about a soul in a person's body is nitfis, is grabbed, is taken into the body. That means the soul is affected. The soul could be, we say that, we're allergic to certain, just like a person can be allergic to peanuts. The soul's allergic to certain experiences. And if a person does certain experiences, it causes a very strong anxiety and discomfort for the soul. Like it says elsewhere, so this idea that we say about a soul filling a body and is affected by the experience does not apply to the essence of God that fills the world. And that way the difference. And therefore, truth to be told, and therefore, because we're saying now that God's presence in the world is in a disconnected way, we cannot say that the world gets a life force from God. If we're disconnected, how can we receive God's sustenance? To be receiving, it's like you have to have a wire, a plug, a conduit, a pipe that connects us. If we are moved, if God is moved like Kadesh, separate from us, we can't be getting our light, our sustenance, our existence from God's essence. So what do we have? And here's how we start discussing now the extension of God's name. It's just an expansion, the spreading of light. That Hashem gives life force, that Hashem gives existence to the higher world and the lower worlds. Who al derech mashal, it could be understood from a parable, like a concept. If you imagine that you have God's name, and God's name, which is a disconnect from God already, is giving off a ray of light of God's name. Shehu ushmoy echad. We know Hashem and His name, even though it's separate, there's still one. So we're not talking about both sides of our mouth. We're just explaining that the name has two qualities. On one hand, the name is a completely disengagement from the essence of Hashem. At the same time, it's deeply connected to the essence of Hashem, just like by a person. So we say Hashem ushmoy echad because there is nothing else. When you see God's name, or you see God's glory that shines off of His name, or the light of that light, it's all the essence of God. There's no other supplier. Like it says about God's name, that is the very high level. God's name is separate. It's up there. It doesn't come down into this world. What comes down to this world? What comes down to this world is a ray of light, an extension, a beam, so to speak, of aura that comes off of God's name. That's what's coming to us. In other words, it's a light of Hashem. Now, this level is what we're talking about now in Tanya here. The Alter Rebbe says this level that comes into the world, that is what relates to us, that understands us, that is affected by us. That is the part that is nitfas. It's enclosed. It actually engages the world. And this level of light, this revelation of God's name that shines into this world is mislabeshes mamish. It actually gets engaged, actually gets enclosed. In the higher exalted worlds. And the lower worlds, to give them life. And it's grabbed, it's held in them. And now he's going to use a number of expressions found throughout Chassidus that each one could have its own chapter explaining it, its own class explaining it. We'll go through each one individually very quickly. So this light that comes to us now, you might think, so 1 second. So once we got Hashem's name, which is a disconnect, and then it's a light of Hashem's name. So now already we can reach it. We just fill up our bags. We can fill up we go. No. At that point, it's still something which is, even for Atzilus, even for the highest worlds, it's way above it. So what's needed next? Next, you have to have something called mimutza'im rabim. Many mimutzah. What's a mimutzah? A mimutzah is something which is in between. But that means it's something that could relate to each side. For an example, when you want to do an adapter to plug a certain plug into another country's outlet, you have to have that on one side has a relation to an American outlet, and on one side has a relation to a European outlet. That means this mimutzah, this adapter, really could reach both sides. That's a mimutzah. Mimutzah is something that's in between, but on one end I relate to here, on one end I relate to here. So God goes through a process called mimutzah, but He uses the word rabim, because this is talking about in quantity. Quantitatively, it's many. It's not like there's one adapter. There's millions and billions and trillions of layers that it goes through to come down to the next level. Then he says, "V'tzimsumim rabim v'atzumim." When it gets down into tzimsumim, tzimsum is something which makes a complete contraction, completely minimizing it. And that he says two expressions: many and strong. One is a quantity thing, and one is a quality thing. Quantity means I could have a thin cover or a thin block. But many of them, it's like, for example, you go outside in the freezing cold weather, and I can put on a sweater. It's not going to help me that much. If I put on 20 sweaters, I might be schwitzing. What happened? It's only as thin as the sweater is still the same thin. Yeah, but many of them create a blockage. Same thing is true with some that are small, but many of them could add up to make a full blockage. And also, some that are very strong, you can put on some of these down coats, or you put on a heavy curtain on your window that does a complete block of the sunlight. It's not just a minimize, it's like a curtain. It's a blackout. It's a blackout one. So that's atzumi, very strong. Then you have something called the shtashlos hamadregas. The shtashlos is when things go down like a chain, one level to the next. What's a chain? A chain has like one link to the next. That means it's getting lower down to more and more levels. Derech ilu el v'chulu. Ilu el is even another idea which is even more disconnected because it's called cause and effect. The way cause and effect works is in general is that you have something which comes down to the lowest level of the previous world or the previous level. Let's take one level is made up of 10 spheres. Chachma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes. That's a Chod Yesod Malchus. When you get down to Malchus, that Malchus can cause a reaction in the Chachma of the next level. No difference that I could say something to somebody that would do something which I was feeling something in my mind, and then I felt it in my heart, and then I did an action. I said or did something. An action could be speaking, or an action could be doing that impacts someone else. That person goes whoop, it hits that person in the head, touches his heart. He does an action. What does that mean? There's a cause and effect. So it's a disconnect, but it's related because what causes the second person to react intellectually, then emotionally, and then with action is my intellectual and emotional actions that brought a connection to him, which means everything causes result. That cause becomes the new that cause causes an effect, and that effect creates a new cause now. So if I, for example, inspire somebody to go on a diet, and that person meets someone else to go on a diet, I cause him, he caused him. So me and the third guy don't have anything in common really, except there was someone in the middle that I affected, that affected him. So you have the cause and effect. That's ilu. All these are processes in the way that Hashem's light gets diminished, degraded, and coming down. We gave an example in the past where you see a major change is the sunlight that comes off the moon. The sunlight that comes in there in the daytime, you can have it lighter and darker, stronger, but it's all sunlight. When you have the sunlight off the moon, it's all sunlight. There's nothing else in the moon, only sunlight. But you could look at it directly. 1 second, how? Because the light that you're seeing is so diminished, it's only a reflection of the original light. So what we're getting in this world, when Hashem's Haidai, Zivai, of Shemai comes in this world, is a very diminished level. But that level is much greater than Atzilus. Much greater. It's the spirituality of angels and levels that is above and beyond. So what's called down on the lowest part of the totem pole by Hashem could be the highest, the most amazing parts on our side. He says, V'hinei ha'arazu. Av shalamayla hi me'ira u'mespashetes b'chinas b'ligvol. Now, this light that's above, before it comes down, it's an unbelievable, unfiltered, infinite light. It's infinite. It's one. You can't divide it up. When you have the original level of godliness shining, you can't say this is higher, this is lower, this is chesed, this is gevurah. Nothing exists there except God's light. There is no. I'm not sure of a good metaphor for this. I was trying to think of a light before it hits a prism, but it's not really the same thing, because in the light that hits a prism, that's already a light that has many things in it. It's just that the prism brings it out. So, but there's a level of godliness that's infinite. Believable means it can't be described. There's no limits. And that comes. So this slide, he says, so even though this light, as it starts off shining into the world, is an infinite light that can give infinite existence to all worlds, it's sort of like when you have something coming from the power station at 4 billion watts, whatever it is, coming down the original power station before it hits the first transformers. That has enough energy, and that is energy unfiltered, that could do vacuum cleaners and air conditioners, refrigerators, and whatever you want, lights and heaters. It doesn't have a limit. It can do anything and everything because it's a resource. But right now, if you try and connect to it, you'll blow apart. You can't handle it. Alpha Picane. Nevertheless, this light that was pure and simple and unfiltered, when it comes down into this world, as we said, comes into this world, he uses here three beautiful expressions. Refers to Bria, Hayitzurim refers to Yetzira, and Vanasim refers to Asiya. These are the three worlds after Atzilus where things actually come into existence. At this point, the light's divided, and this is fascinating, into 613 channels, or 613 parts. That means the primary light of Hashem that comes off of God's name, that lights and brings existence into this world, is 613 channels. I know in the periodic table, they have only, I think, 118, of 613 yet, but maybe they'll find it one day. Maybe there isn't the discovery, I don't know. But in lights of Hashem, there's 613 ways it's divided up. Keneged Tayag Mitzvahs HaTorah. This corresponds to the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah. Shehein Tayag Mini Hamshaches Ha'arazu Me'edain Seif Baruch Hu L'Haril Nishmas Adam. This is 613 ways that the lights of Hashem are drawn down to give light to the soul. Now, before we go further, the Alter Rebbe is going to say something here which is outstandingly awesome. What's he saying here? At first glance, we would think, why does a person have 613 parts of a body? Because we know we have 248 limbs and 365 giddim, translated as veins, sinews, arteries, whatever you want to translate it as. So you might think we have 613 or 248 and 365 to correspond to the mitzvahs. So we should know something else is just the opposite. We know two things preceded, this is beautiful, two things preceded the world. What preceded the world was the Shema of a Yid and the Torah. The question is, which came first from those two? The discussion, I think it's Eliyahu, it's a discussion, what came first? We know that before the world, there existed Torah and existed the Neshama of a Yid. What came first? It doesn't say, but we conclude what comes first is the Neshama. Why do we say that? Because Hashem in the Torah says, talk to the Jew. Tell the Jew should do this, which means the Yid, in order for if the Torah is coming and didn't have a Yid yet existing, who are you talking to? The fact that there's a Yid in the discussion means the Yid existed here already. That means the soul of a Yid existed already before the Torah. That means Yid came first. That means when it came time to design the Torah is being designed, which came second, it had a match that's pre-existing the Yid. That means the 613 parts of the Torah and the mitzvahs are made to match, to come fill the 613 parts of a Yid. Now let's take a second to talk about the Yid. The Jew has 613 parts, 248 and 365. But the Neshama does too. You see, a lot of times today you don't find it so much because today they advanced these computers and wires much better. But in the olden days, when you had a back of a computer and you had to plug in a monitor or a screen, you had a back that had like 30 or 40 pins in it. And the pins had to line up perfectly to the receiver. Otherwise, you'd bend the pin, it wouldn't go in. It had to line up perfectly, many, many pins in one clamp, and it clicked in. And sometimes you had a latch that held it into place. What does that mean? The receiver has to be designed to meet that which is giving it. So if you have to have, for an example, the screen or the printer coming into something, you have to have the receiving end of enough holes that match exactly laid out. That means if the neshama and the guf are going to merge and become one, that means the neshama and the guf both have to have matching components. That means both the neshama and the guf has to have 613 levels or ideas, and they plug exactly into each other. How do we work and function and live and exist? By making sure all those are active. So the tefillin and the mezuzah and the kashrus and the brachas and the benching, all those are lined up 613 times. And that is what makes a healthy relationship with the guf and the neshama. But there's a third component, or the real other component, that's the Torah. The Torah, which the other component is Hashem's light coming into the world. So all this is one continuous theme, the 613 Hamshachis, which is 613 mitzvahs, which are 613 parts of the neshama, the 613 parts of the guf. All that is one theme, all designed for the soul of a Jew. That came first. That means what came first? The soul of a Jew, and that is the core. That's the beginning. So we see here, nishmas ha'adam, which this all comes down, these 613 hamshachos, these drawing down, is lahayil nishmas ha'adam, to give light and life to the soul of man, which is also which is also made up of 248 limbs and 365 giddim, sinews, etc. This is the key line here. Asher ba'avura, it's for the neshama, it's for the yid who ikir tachlis yididis v'amshachas harazu lamata. It's unbelievable. The Alter Rebbe says, why did Hashem create the lights coming into this world in 613 ways? And what's the purpose of it? To give light to the soul of a Jew, to give light to the guf of a Jew, to give you existence, to give us existence. In other words, the purpose of the light coming down, the purpose of Torah, is all for the yid. And that's Tachlis Hamshachas Arazula Mata, L'Kol HaNevroyim, to all the Bria, as you said, V'Hayitzurim, and the Yitzira, and Nasim, Ol Asiya, Shetachlis Kulan, Hu Ha'adam Kandeda. As is known, the ultimate purpose and reason for everything is man. So man is the source, man is the reason, man is the whole goal of this experience. In other words, we have a discussion in chapter 41 in Tanya, where it says, A person has to say, Bishvili nivra elam. For me, the world was created. That's not meant to be a ego trip, God forbid. It's meant to be a responsibility thing, which means if there's just a simple example, a silly example, if you have America wants to send up a mission to the moon. So they're going to have maybe thousands of people involved building a rocket ship. Many people putting up all sorts of cameras and lasers and radios. Hundreds of people sitting in the computer room. All different things, all different pieces come together. And they're sending one guy up on a mission to be in this rocket ship that's going to go up to the moon and do this mission, or to Mars, whatever it is. Can't be Mars too far, but it's going up there. This person has to know one thing. Everything going on down there. You see the tens of billions of dollars invested. You see all the cities that were built around here with offices and buildings and the computers. You see the launching site. You see this. All of it is for this moment of you getting in here. In other words, the responsibility, the purpose, everything. The uniform you were given was designed for you. Everything was designed for you because you have a mission. And what's your mission? The mission is bring down God's presence into this world. In other words, the responsibility that we're getting here is, and the message we're being told here is, it's all about me, the here and the now. And not in the way of ego, like we say, the world surrounds around me. No, the world surrounds my responsibility. The reason I was put here, the reason I was pointed, I am that one astronaut. I am that one guy that can go and create right here at Dir B'Tachtonim. And Hashem sent the light down to this world, and to this world, and gave you a neshama, and put you in a body, all for this one moment of making a bracha on a cup of coffee, for this one moment of benching when you're done eating. In other words, you might think, what's this one thing? It's all for this one thing. And this is a tremendous empowering of us. At the same time, the responsibility that we carry, that this is real. It's all for this moment. And this is a tremendous, tremendous perspective. This chapter gives us. Now, we're going to start the next couple lines. I'm going to go back and do this next week. Continue. He says, all of this is talking in general. But everything in Yiddishkeit has a klal and a prat. What does that mean? If you want to take the Torah today, we have hundreds of pages of Talmud, thousands of pages of Talmud, thousands of pages of Mishnah, thousands of pages of commentary, the Rambam, codes of Jewish law, everything. You have all the Torah itself. You have the 5 books of the Torah. You have the 24 books of the expanded Torah. You have, what's it all start? So it says everything starts in the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments, Aseres HaDibros, is everything starts there. But the truth is, all 10 Commandments, of all the 630 commandments, which is the source of all of Torah, which is the source of all of Responsa, really starts in the first 2 commandments. The first commandment, the Noichi Hashem Elokecha, and Lo Yeh Lecha, the only 2 we heard from God directly. Because everything was included in there. But the truth is, all of that is really included in the word Noichi. All of that is really included in the Aleph. All of that is really included in the pintle of the top of the Aleph. In other words, you could take it out to the nucleus. It's similar to if you see a giant tree that weighs 50 or 100 tons, whatever it is, with hundreds of branches and thousands of fruit growing on it. And you say how all this, you go back in the process, and you go back to the very beginning, it was a small seed, it's the size of a sesame seed, that was put into the ground. And that started the entire process. Everything that you're going to come here is only what was found in that seed, in the DNA, in the identity. And the biggest proof is, you're never going to have a banana grow on this tree. It's never going to give birth to a penguin. It's never going to lay eggs. Why not? Because it's not in the seed. It's not in the core. In the core, what's there? That means inside the core of this seed, everything, the shape of the apples, the possible colors of the apples, the type of the flavor it has, the nutrients, the vitamins, the type of leaves, the shape of the leaves, type of branches, how they grow. It's all already in there, but it's all b'derech klal. It's not yet identified. When it grows and it expands, and this is now, wow, it's all in there. Same thing as Torah. So when we say the 613 commandments, that's in general 613. But there's much, much more. Infinite amount of commandments. As a matter of fact, it's actually infinite. There's no end. The only reason we come to an end because there's only a certain amount of time human beings are alive to talk. If we had infinite time to do it, there would be no end. It's an endless, just like a tree. How many generations can a tree grow for? As long as you let them keep replanting, keep growing and expanding. What do you mean? Where's the end? There is no end. There is no end to how far. So halacha starts off as 613, though it came originally from Monechi Hashem Lekecha, etc. But when you get down to it, it's hundreds of millions. So you talk about someone who wants to, convert and become a Jew. We tell them there are 630 commandments. That I can handle, which is really like a couple billion. Because you think about it, take a commandment of Shabbos, which is just 2 commandments or 3 commandments, and suddenly you have thousands and thousands of halacha, just how to make a cup of coffee. how to put a piece of bread, a piece of challah on the stove, how to do this, how to walk, how to carry, how to make it air. It's endless. And so all of that is included in the original. And what we're going to talk about next week is we're going to go into the discussion, why is it that way? Why is that some mitzvahs we seem to do many, many times, over and over the mitzvah of making a bracha? The mitzvah of paraduma, not so often. The mitzvah of, how come some people do this, but some people don't? We're going to start understanding the point and the journey of each individual soul, what a story is. And from that, we're going to get to understand what does it mean, chelik? What does it mean every Jew has a part? Because every Jew has their part in the story. You have an actor, you have a factory, you have a watch. Everything has its part. You can't say, I want to be the spring, and I want to be the spindle, and I want to be. Has their job, and we'll see that every Jew is chelik elika. It's a part, because we each have a particular mission. And we're going to go and take that and take the rest of the chapter here. We'll stop here for now. We want to wish everyone a beautiful, healthy year. And this is a beautiful time to do the chapter coming up. Like I said, in about a month or two, we can have a Yud Shvat, which is a Basi Lagani. We get into the whole theme of Dir B'Tachtenim, which really this one tells us about that responsibility, that journey. And we'll continue with that, God willing, next week.